Who was Aurangzeb? Was he a saint, as many describe him, a perfect ruler, a perfect Muslim, or was he a bigot, someone who hated a particular group of people that did not belong to his religion? Or was he a complex emperor? That's what we will uncover in this video by looking at history. Talking about history, in the history of Indian kingship, there was no one perhaps that was more controversial as this man, whose full name was Muhyiddin Muhammad Aurangzeb Alamgir I. Alamgir was his title, and he was the sixth emperor of the Mughal Empire, commonly known to historians as Aurangzeb. And often he is considered as the last effective Mughal emperor, and he's considered to be an authoritarian, a gifted general, and someone under whom the Mughal Empire saw the greatest expansion and saw the highest degree of state centralization. This emperor is known for his deep devotion to Islam. Perhaps that is the reason why many look at him automatically as someone that was against people of other faith. We will dive into this more in this video. And one thing to note is that he was a little different from some of his Mughal predecessors in that he wanted a traditional approach to Islam, and he wanted Islam, the traditional Islam, to have a place within the Mughal Empire. Talking about recent times, 2015 was a bad year for Aurangzeb and history in general in the country India. There was debates in the capital, New Delhi, as to whether the name Aurangzeb on a major street should be removed. And a local Sikh group raised this idea originally that Aurangzeb was one of the most, I quote, tyrannical Mughal rulers who committed the most heinous crimes in India, unquote. So the ruling party BJP, which is known to be a nationalist Hindu party, it jumped on this, and they wanted his name to be removed. They portrayed him as someone who was cruel, who was who always put a sword to people's heads, offering them no choice between Islam and death, who banned music and so on. So that is something that happened. One thing to realize at this point is that there are different perspectives of Aurangzeb. On one extreme, you have the Hindu nationalist view, which is the modern view of Aurangzeb, that he was a bigot. He enforced mass scale conversions of Hindus. He destroyed thousands of temples, and he restricted many festivals and celebrations of non-Muslims. On the other hand, you have the description that he was a saint-like figure, a perfect Muslim, and a just ruler. Which exactly is more close to the truth? That is what we will find out, and we shall see that the truth is actually between these two extremes, and we will find out which side it is more closer to. These are some pictures that you see where tensions were raised by different parties in India, and you can see signage on the roads vandalized. Not only the Aurangzeb Road, Babar Road, for example, was vandalized by Hindu Sena. Calls were made even to change Akbar Road to Maharana Pratap Road. And Akbar is generally viewed as someone more open-minded than Aurangzeb, and more open to inclusion of other people in his administration. How true that is, I mean, you have to look at statistics actually, but as you can see, the vandalism happened by many groups, and this happened in many places in India. So this also divided India. People actually criticized this decision of renaming history, and some called it, bigotry. In fact, as you can see, so a lot of sections of society, the historians and activists, actually called this out. So when we talk about Aurangzeb and his history, how it was recorded, it is very important to note that the British narrative of Aurangzeb plays a factor. So the British had a colonial slant to many things that happened in India, And a lot of medieval Indian history was rewritten by colonial scholarship during the time of the British Raj, as it is called, the British rule, the British colonization of India. So the British basically wanted uh, divide and rule to make their life easy in India and to become rich off of India. So they usually resorted to techniques that would build hatred and animosity between Muslims and Hindus. And one way they did this is by portraying certain powerful leaders, and certainly Aurangzeb was one, in a very negative light. So a lot of these things have survived today, and people have a very uh, communal view of history. So in order to find out who Aurangzeb really was, you have to look at the Aurangzeb of history, not from the lens of Hindutva, not from the lens of the BJP. Let's look at Aurangzeb from the lens of history, who he really was. And I mean, a few things about Aurangzeb is that he wanted to be a just king, and there are a lot of things that show this to be true. Historical documents, historical facts. He wanted to be a good Muslim, no doubt, and he wanted to be a just emperor at the same time. And he wanted to be looked at as someone who was a sustainer of Mughal culture and Mughal customs. So, what the British did is that they ruled India ruthlessly and used this policy of divide and rule to subjugate the Indian population. This is no secret. British used this policy in many places they colonized, and a lot of misconceptions happened because of this. At time it meant changing the historical narrative regarding individuals, like I said, like Aurangzeb, and they have done this, especially with Aurangzeb. Um, this occupation, I mean, one must not forget, the British occupation of India was a very brutal occupation that was meant to basically benefit the British at the loss of Indian lives, wealth, and Indians had to pay heavy taxes and so on. And there is so many things that happened. Famines that were imposed because they wanted to reserve the crop for the soldiers that were fighting World War in Britain. So they wanted to keep those food reserves in the country of Britain by starving the local population. And estimates show that millions of people died, close to 4.5 million people died, and it was actually made illegal for people, the British people who had a good heart, to give charity. So we must understand that this occupation was very brutal, and they would have done anything to benefit. And the history of colonial India shows exactly that. I mean, they did not regard for life. They did not care about Hindus. They did not care about Muslims. One thing they cared about is their own prosperity. So to achieve that end, they would have done anything. And I believe they had, uh, I mean, and there is a lot of books that prove this, that they had rewritten a lot of history. So that is definitely something to be kept in mind. So uh, some of the claims about Aurangzeb are that he destroyed temples. People say he destroyed thousands of temples, and I mean, I read on some sites they said he destroyed 60,000 temples. I have no idea where they get those numbers from, but that's what they're saying. But these people, they fail to acknowledge that yes, Aurangzeb destroyed certain temples, but they fail to acknowledge that he also issued many orders protecting Hindu temples. And he, in fact, granted stipends and land to Brahmins. In many times, he issued farmans, or the orders to protect the holy people. and to leave them, to not harass them. He ensured their safety. So also we have people who claim that he restricted celebration of non-Muslim festivals, but again, they do not mention the other side, which is he also put such restrictions on extravagance on Muslim festivals like Muharram and Eid. So they conveniently omit this fact. So in order to understand who Aurangzeb really was, you need to look at both sides. You need to look at the complete picture of who Aurangzeb really was. So, one thing that is also conveniently omitted is that, in fact, Aurangzeb employed more Hindus in his administration than any other prior Mughal ruler. I mean, that this could be shocking, but I mean, check your history. This is true. Under his empire, more than 31% of nobles in the Mughal Empire, high-ranking nobles, were actually Hindus, and this is the highest among any other Mughal empire emperor. Excuse me. So of course we're not saying he was without faults, and we do know only a few things about that, and that is what we will do. We will uncover the true Aurangzeb. Like I said, we'll look at him from a religious perspective. We know that Aurangzeb was a Muslim, and although he was not the kind of Muslim the modern haters of Aurangzeb suppose him to have been, someone who destroyed temples, someone who forced people to convert to Islam. I mean, the Quran says, "La ikraha fi din." There is no compulsion in religion. So if we believe that he was a true Muslim, I mean, you're saying that he was a strong Muslim, but at the same time you're saying he did something against Islam. What is the proof? That is what I want people to think about. Did he really do that? Is there any history behind it, or is it just some tales, or it is coming from a colonial era scholarship? So it is very important to really understand the sources, and that is when we will get a full picture of who Aurangzeb really was. Let's talk about his birth. Aurangzeb was born on November 3rd, 1618, in Dahod, or it's also called Dohad. I think it was previously called Dohad. Now it's called Dahod. And he was born during the rule of Jahangir. Jahangir was the grandfather of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb's father was Shahjahan. And Aurangzeb's kingly title was Alamgir. And this is a combination of two words. In Persian, Alam means world, and Gir comes from like the word to conquer. So the world conqueror. And he was the emperor of India uh, from the year 1658 to 1707. So he ruled, for a significantly long time. And like I said, you can see in the map here, Dahod or Dohar is a city on the banks of Dudimati River in the state of Gujarat, India. This place, in fact, held a very special place in the heart of Aurangzeb. And this is something special about Mughal emperors. I mean, people say, oh, these were foreign invaders and they just came to loot the wealth and stuff like that. But these people came here and became one of our own people. They invested here, they built monuments. They did not steal the wealth and take it back to the countries or places they came from. They came and formed what we know as India today, and this is a fact. If you contrast that with what the British did, I mean, they took away all the wealth and they shipped it back to their country to make their country rich. Whereas Mughal emperors, they are buried in India. They lived there. They were born there. I mean, Aurangzeb, he was, his family was there since many generations, and Aurangzeb is buried um, in India, in Huldabad. So there is a huge difference. Anyways, Dohar is a, I mean, the name Dohar comes from two borders, meaning signifying the place. of the city in between the two borders of Rajasthan and Gujarat, and Dahod is in Gujarat. So one interesting point is that when Aurangzeb was born, his father Shahjahan, he was actually the Subedar of Gujarat, and Subedar is a word that is used for a high ranking official in the Mughal Empire that was assigned a Suba, and a Suba was a province. So his dad was like the kind of ruler of Gujarat, you can say. And another thing, Shah Jahan again means Shah means king and Jahan means world. So the king of the world. It's kind of an interesting theme in the Mughal Empire where they had these kind of names. And also Jahangir also means world conqueror, who was the grandfather of Aurangzeb. So what was he like in his early years? Well, he was devout in his youth, and he was close to the Muslim orthodoxy, and he was free from any sort of royal Mughal traits that his predecessors had, whether it was sensuality, drunkenness, and having royal pleasures, you name it. So Aurangzeb was actually Shah Jahan's third son. So he was preceded by two brothers, Dara Shikoh being the eldest and Shah Shuja being the second in line. And after Aurangzeb, there was another brother who was named Murad. And right from the beginning, Aurangzeb got a very good education. He was educated in the worldly sciences. He was also educated in the Quran and Hadith. Hadith are something that is the narrations of Prophet Muhammad, one of the two sources from which Muslim law or Muslim understanding is derived from. So what happened is, after the emperor, there was actually a struggle for power. The Mughals actually did not have a rule or a set custom for succession. So there was a fight for power, and the sons from a young age were locked into competition for the Mughal throne. And it is documented that Shah Jahan, for some reason, favored his eldest son, Dara Shikoh. And Dara Shikoh was, again, like we said, the eldest son of Aurangzeb, eldest son of Shah Jahan, I'm sorry. And Mughals actually inherited this Central Asian custom that all family members had equal claims to political power. So the birth order was not relevant, meaning it was not accepted or not customary that the eldest son is going to become the king or the emperor after the emperor passes away, meaning Shah Jahan. So they did not have a custom like that, which is called primogeniture. Um, and they actually followed a system where all the princes had equal opportunity to uh, get to the throne, and they had this concept called in Persian, it's called ya takht ya tabut, which means either the takht or the throne, or tabut or the grave. So they were pretty serious about that. So they wanted to get to the throne using any means possible to, and by showing that they were actually fit to do that. So Aurangzeb actually got a chance to impress Shah Jahan, where there was actually a fight. There was actually a fight between wild elephants. During that time, Mughals had a royal pastime. They would watch, elephant fights, and that is something they're known to do. So during one of the fight, that was called by Shah Jahan, a wild elephant kind of got out of hand, and he charged at Aurangzeb, and somehow Aurangzeb managed to spear the elephant by the head or the trunk, and somehow he survived the encounter. So that kind of impressed Shah Jahan, and he noticed He noticed the skill that Aurangzeb had, and I mean, history does not say where Dara Shikoh was when that encounter happened. So that is something to notice. That Aurangzeb, from the very early in his life, he was actually sent to battlefields. So here, he was just 16 years old when Aurangzeb was moved from the central court to different places to actually help run the empire. And what happened with this is that Aurangzeb gained some really valuable skills. He became very skillful at administration. His military skills improved, and he got some diplomatic skills because of this, because of his hard work. He was fighting for the Mughal kingdom between 1635 and 1657, and he was engaged in many battles that really brought him some solid experience. He administers Gujarat, Multan, and also Deccan. So I mean, Dara Shikoh, on the other hand, he did not get this kind of exposure, and he did not have the skill of military tactics and being a good military general, and also fighting these battles, on the field. So Dara lacked this real world experience, and because he was confined to the rigidly controlled environment of the central court. So when interestingly, when Aurangzeb was actually fighting these wars, Dara actually tried to intervene, and he tried to hinder Aurangzeb's success by actually convincing his father to actually uh, you know withdraw military forces. So if Aurangzeb was near victory, uh, about to succeed in a battle, then Shah Jahan would be influenced by Dara Shikoh, and they would withdraw the forces. So this was a little frustrating actually for Aurangzeb. So, anyways, what happened was in 1657, Shah Jahan woke severely ill one morning, and he actually failed to make an appearance at the Jharoka. This was a place. It was kind of like a balcony where the king showed up, and people did his darshan. Yeah, they saw him and they made prayers for him and blessed him. So he did not show up, and actually he did not show up for a week after that. So as you can imagine, news spread that the king is severely ill. Some people believe the king actually died, and it actually had an effect on the empire. People started looting. There was security issues, as you can imagine, when the law and order is shaken up. So as a result of this, Shah Jahan's sons, they believed that the father was at the verge of death, and he could be gone at any time. So they tried to seize this opportunity to actually fight for the throne. And a struggle happened between Aurangzeb and Dara Shikoh, and the other brothers were involved. But finally, Aurangzeb outmaneuvered his three brothers, and he manages to ascend the throne. And yeah, I mean, they followed this Persian proverb, which was "Ya takht ya tabut," either the throne or the grave. And Aurangzeb finally had Dara Shikoh executed, because he was also going to be a threat to his empire, and he was actually also trying to kill Aurangzeb, because of because of the throne. According to a Persian account, in 1652, they recorded Dara as a wolf thirsty for the blood of his brothers. So this was common in the Mughal princes, that they would the princes would fight uh, for the throne, and they would use any means possible to get to that. So one of his brother was kind of driven out of India, and Dara tried a lot to actually control the flow of news to his brothers by detaining informants, and he used many tactics, such as even closing down the roads. But all of this failed, and the brothers already knew of his plan, and that's how um, that's how Aurangzeb actually became a king. This is actually a battle of Samugar, where Dara Shikoh and Aurangzeb, along with Murad, fought against each other. And you can see here one elephant is actually fleeing. This was the elephant of Dara Shikoh, um, who actually lost the battle, and he ran away from the battlefield. So this is the throne, a magnificent throne of the Mughals. It had jewels in it. It had the peacocks. It is said that this had like this was made from over 1 ton of gold, had several hundred pearls and stuff like that. Just an interesting tidbit. So Aurangzeb, like I said, became the king on July 31st, 1658. Aurangzeb crowned himself king in Delhi's Shalimar Gardens, and he took the title Alamgir, the world conqueror. One thing that is interesting is that Aurangzeb showed leniency to most former supporters of Dara Shikoh and his other brothers. He actually welcomed them in his troops, gave them positions in his own army. Even the chief advisors in the brothers' troops were actually given positions, and there was no revenge that was exacted from them. Only a very, very few select people from Dara's circle were not shown leniency, and this was because of their extreme disrespect and extreme planning against Aurangzeb, that he felt that action had to be taken. So, what Aurangzeb did is something that has to be judged according to his time and his customs. So, to truly understand Aurangzeb, we should understand what his worldview was. We cannot impose the values we have today and judge Aurangzeb. Rather, it is only fair that we look at Aurangzeb from the standards of his time, the customs they had, and the time that he lived in. So that would actually give us the true picture of Aurangzeb Alamgir. Talking about his empire, Aurangzeb inherited a vast empire, a thriving empire, which was expansionist in nature, as were many other empires, almost all empires of the time. He crushed rebellions early on and waged wars for expansion. He also ordered the execution of Sikh Guru Tej Bahadur in 1675. And this is an event that is brought up by the Sikh community. And I suppose that forms the basis of their hating Aurangzeb. But one should understand why this was done. This was mainly done because Guru Tej Bahadur, he was actually taking up arms against the state. This would be no different if someone takes up arms and conspires against the state today and plans to attack them, plans to destroy the state militarily. I mean, I'm afraid they're going to probably face the same punishment, if not worse, going through a lot of torture and stuff before losing their life. So this is true even today. So one must understand what happened, what the context was. I mean, is Aurangzeb known to kill people, kill gurus, or the holy men? If that was a pattern, then yes. But I mean, if you look at history, Aurangzeb did not do that. Why did he select this particular person? And the reason is that he basically took up arms and wanted to act militarily against the Mughal state. So uh, also Aurangzeb was very concerned about justice. He did not even care about his own family members when state interests were compromised, when justice was compromised. And also he had the burden of expanding the Mughal Empire. All of this responsibility rested on his shoulders. And this is something you see from the kind of names even his ancestors took, right? The king of the world, or the world conqueror, Shah Jahan or Jahangir, and even Aurangzeb Alamgir. So they had this vision that they wanted to stick to the customs and expand the empire and bring about justice and prosperity for the people that lived in the empire. So, uh, I mean, Aurangzeb was most likely the richest person of his time. Akbar, in fact, is ranked among the top 10 richest people of all time. And you can only imagine Aurangzeb was, the richest person of his time, because the empire even expanded more when Aurangzeb was the emperor. Uh, Mughal Empire was the largest manufacturing and economic power in the world at the end of the 17th century. So you can imagine the kind of wealth it brought, and how the life of the people was. Um, the Indian contribution to the world GDP at that time was about, towards the end of the Mughal Empire, was about 20, 27, 24%. And I mean, we all know it was brought down to 4% by the time India got independence. And that's how much the British milked India. I mean, they looted all the jewels and all the artifacts and all the items of worth, and took away all the wealth. The wealth of the Mughal Empire around the year 1700 is estimated to be a staggering $21 trillion. That is as of today. And Aurangzeb is also known for his diplomacy. He used diplomacy to further strengthen the Mughal Empire. At the same time, he was also not hesitant to use force to actually make people comply, and especially when they were acting against him. They built up several architectures and wonders. This is one of the seven wonders of the world. So this gives you a prime example of Mughal wealth. In fact, the British were so impressed by the wealth and power of the Mughal emperors that the word actually entered the English language as Mughal, Mogul, to actually describe someone as a all-powerful ruler or like a pioneer of an industry. Um, so that's how much they were impressed, with the Mughals at that time. Aurangzeb's justice. So Aurangzeb is well known for his justice. His quest for earthly power existed alongside his efforts for uh, giving out justice. He wanted, just rule to be established. Here are some records by this Italian traveler, Nicolai Manucci, who said he was of a melancholy temperament, always busy at something or another, wishing to execute justice and arrive at some important decisions. Ishwardasa wrote about Aurangzeb in Sanskrit in 1663. Again, we are seeing these records. I mean, records in Sanskrit uh, written by Hindus of that time. This person, Ishwaradasa, who wrote in Sanskrit, was a Hindu, and he called Aurangzeb Dharmya, meaning righteous, and even noted that his tax policies were actually lawful and vidhivat. So whenever Aurangzeb failed to stick to his principles of justice, it really bothered him. And there were times, he was a human after all, and there were times when uh, he did not do that to his level uh, of expectation, and it really discomforted him. And he really thought about that. Um, let's talk about Aurangzeb, the administrator. Here's a quote from Bhimsen Saxena, who was a Hindu member of Aurangzeb's administration. And this is actually taken from the Persian writing. Uh, and I quote, Shah Jahan used to hold court 1 day a week. So his father, Shah Jahan, used to hold court 1 day a week. And owing to the cherishing of truth and devotion of God, nobody had need to lodge a complaint. Now, our Emperor Aurangzeb holds court twice daily, and the crowd of complaints grows greater. So, I mean, Aurangzeb, he saw a vast kingdom, but what's amazing is that it still did not prevent him from being involved personally in the matters of the people in his pursuit of justice, even though he ruled a much bigger empire than his previous predecessors. So Aurangzeb also expressed on many occasions deep concern for the safety and security throughout his territory for all the people, Hindus, Muslims, Jains, and everybody that lived in his territory. Actually, he wrote to his sons repeatedly, and he wrote to the nobles about this matter of safety and security, and he was concerned with the safety of the road for its people. He got upset with them if the safety was not ensured. He actually even did not hesitate to take people to task if they failed to meet their duties. So, what Aurangzeb did was not unusual for his time in turning to violence. And this was a standard political tactic for Aurangzeb and others during his time. State violence was seen as something permitted and necessary if it established stability and cooperation with their kingdom. Many states do this today. I mean, this is no different. In many nations, governments they use force against people that are against it, and or say anything. Sometimes if you say something against the government, something they don't like, you're punished. And their world was also like this. um, that's something to keep in mind. Now let's talk about this status of Hindus in the Mughal Empire. Of course, there was more Hindus than Muslims, and we will see how they were treated in the Mughal Empire. This is a few lines from the poet Chandarbhan Brahman. O king, may the world bow to your command. May lips drip with expressions of thanks and salutations. Since it is your spirit that watches over the people, wherever you are, may God watch over you. This is written by a Hindu poet, and believe it or not, Hindus actually fared much better in Aurangzeb's massive state than others. Since Akbar's time, Rajputs and Hindus were actually part of the Mughal administration and served as full members. And the Hindus were given formal ranks in the Mughal administration, which were known as mansabs. Mansabs were ranks that were symbols of their status in the imperial hierarchy. And Muslims dominated numerically uh, among the Mughal elite, but there was, I mean, that's not to deny that the Hindus held several key positions, and Hindus held high ranks and were trusted with several critical state businesses, as history has documented. And in the vast majority of cases, with Aurangzeb, he was unconcerned with the religious identity of the state officials. I mean, he did not care. He hired them for their skill, he hired them for their honesty, which is how it should be. And this again shows that he was a just ruler that wanted advancement for his empire, he wanted advancement for its people. Here's a comparison between Aurangzeb and Dara. This again shows, that Aurangzeb, on the one hand, was supported by more Marathas. Dara was supported by more Rajputs. What is very interesting is that 21% of Hindu nobles sided with Aurangzeb, and which was almost the same as Dara, 24%. So this shows that they did not view Aurangzeb as a bigot that hated Hindus or he hated Hinduism. I mean, they both generated same amount of support almost. And it is also known that these people, they genuinely believed that Aurangzeb was a smart bet. He was a better bet to ascend the throne. Otherwise, 21% of experienced and high-ranking Hindu nobles would never side with Aurangzeb. And this is something to understand, really. Comparing with Akbar's time, who is viewed as somewhat more open and inclusive. I mean, let's look at the numbers. During Akbar's time, Hindus were 22.5% of all the Mughal nobles. And this percentage actually hardly changed under Shahjahan. And the empire actually grew under Shahjahan when compared to the past times. And come Aurangzeb's time, he actually increased the Hindu participation at the higher levels of the Mughal state by nearly 50%. So from 22.5, now it raised almost to 31 or 32%. So 32% of nobility was Hindus. And you can see how much he increased this. And one uh, one French traveler actually described Raja Raghunath, one person uh, who was actually a favorite noble of Aurangzeb. He actually ended up being appointed as his Diwani, which is like a chief finance minister in modern times of the empire. And what is interesting to note is this French traveler described Raja Raghunath as the acting vizier of the empire. And Aurangzeb, in fact, still remembered him many years later after he had died. So this goes to show the kind of relationship he had with people of all faiths. And he appointed this person as the chief finance minister of the empire, who had access to all sorts of documents and secret information. And but Aurangzeb really trusted him, and this shows that religion did not matter to Aurangzeb when it came to running his empire. And he chose, consciously chose many top nobles from the Hindus. And Aurangzeb loved him so much that he, in fact, gave him the title Raja and raised his Mansab rank to 2,500, which is a very high-ranking official in the Mughal Empire. So this shows that there was no litmus test for Mughal employment for the most part. Uh, of course, there could have been jobs, for example, for collecting taxes, the jizya that we'll get to, that could have required someone to be a Muslim, or it was preferred because it was a religious duty. So a Muslim from Bukhara, an interesting incident is when a Muslim from Bukhara once petitioned Aurangzeb to deny imperial advancement to the Persians. So one thing to note is that he was trying to appeal to the Shia Sunni divide because Persians were Shia. So this man thought that he would use the Shia Sunni divide and prod Aurangzeb to actually deny advancement to the Persians who were Shia. But you can see how Aurangzeb rejected this proposal straight away, and he's known to have famously said this in the quote here: "What connection have earthly affairs with religion, and what right have administrative works to meddle with bigotry? For you is your religion, and for me is mine." In fact, this is a verse from the Quran. "Lakum dinukum waliyadin." For you is your religion, and for me is mine. This is what he said. If this rule suggested by this man from Bukhara were established, It would be my duty to extirpate all Hindu Rajas and their followers. Wise men disapprove of the removal from office of able officers. Aurangzeb Alamgir. I mean, what a phenomenal statement. What an inclusive statement for Aurangzeb to make. Some people may be shocked. I mean, you just have to look at history before you judge someone. Look at history from the lens of history. Do not have, don't wear red glasses and say that the world is red. Take off your glasses and look at Aurangzeb for who he really was. Let's talk about some alliances, friendships, and enemies, how people made enemies at that time. Uh, let's talk about Shivaji. Shivaji, on many, many occasions, he allied with many Islamic states. He, in fact, allied many, uh, employed many Muslims. Uh, I mean, just some background that Mughals and Marathas were actually engaged in a very long conflict that was purely for power. And this required, as you can imagine, strategic alliances depending on the situation. So Shivaji allied with Islamic rulers of Bijapur, Golconda, and even the Mughals when it suited him. And he even allied with Hindu powers in South Asia, other Hindu powers. Shivaji welcomed Muslims in his army. He had qazis. I mean, qazi is like a Muslim judge. He had qazis on his payroll, and Muslims were actually among his top commanders. So you can see it was never looked at from like a Hindu versus Muslim perspective. It was all about politics. It was all about power. And that is what, determined their alliances. That is what made friends of someone and enemies of someone. So Mughal alliances were no different. I mean, Aurangzeb, in fact, he sent a Hindu king, not a Hindu king, but a Hindu, uh, you know, commander, Jai Singh, to actually besiege Shivaji at Purandar. And we see how in our times, the Marathas who resisted Mughal rule are portrayed as like Hindu, quote unquote, Hindu versus uh, Hindus defying Muslim tyranny. How the Hindus resisted against Muslims, but this is actually not true. This is not how they looked at it. This is actually very inaccurate and very modern invention used by certain groups to further their agenda. And there are many, many instances where certain Hindu rulers supported Mughals against, you know, other like Hindu powers. So how was Aurangzeb as a moral man and leader? Uh, Again, a quote from Bhimsen Saxena. These quotes are very important because they come from people that were not Muslim, and they were writing in their own languages and recording their experience of Aurangzeb when they were present. And this is something that is more reliable than scholarship from the colonial times written by some people that had a twisted agenda of their own. So this is a quote. The Emperor Aurangzeb wrote a prayer and threw it into the flooded water. Immediately the water began to subside. The prayer of the god devoted emperor was accepted by God, and the world became composed again. Bhimsen Saxena. It is well known that Aurangzeb was more, he appears to be more pious based on his actions. He prayed with much greater regularity than his previous Mughal emperors. He abstained from alcohol and opium. It was a drug that was used by many of his male members of society that, you know, were engaged in pastimes with women and so on. So Aurangzeb actually abstained from all this stuff. And opium actually took the lives of many of the male members of the Mughal family. They used to be over indulging in certain activities with women, and that led to, them losing their lives. Even some died pretty early. Aurangzeb is also known to have sewn like prayer caps out of his own hand, and copied the Quran by hand. In fact, there is a copy that I read about in that was owned by an Emirati person from the Emirates, who had put it on auction, and it was going for a very ridiculously expensive price. Uh, I mean, like 900 million euros or something like that. So that is also true. Um, Again, one incident shows how Aurangzeb actually dismounted during a military clash. So there is a battle going on, and Aurangzeb actually dismounts from his horse or elephant, and actually prays in the battlefield. So I mean, it is clear that he wanted to be a good Muslim, and he wanted to be known and looked up to by his army, by his soldiers, as someone who was a good Muslim, and he wanted to be a role model for them. And falling short of this religious obligation, it really weighed heavily on his heart. Um, Another sign was Aurangzeb actually commissioned the writing of Fatawa-e-Alamgiri, which is also known as Fatawa al-Hindiyya. This is one of the largest collection of Hanafi fiqh that served as a basis of Mughal administration. He invited gathered scholars from different parts of the world, including Hijaz, which is Saudi Arabia. And it is said that he gathered 500 experts in Islamic jurisprudence or fiqh, and 300 of them were from South Asia, 100 from Iraq, and 100 from Hijaz. In 1679, he also revived the jizya tax. And I mean, jizya tax is something that under Islamic rule, non-Muslims are required to pay. And through this, the non-Muslims are granted security. They're granted security of their holy places, security of their lives, and security of their properties, and they're given all the rights and services of the empire. Muslims, on the other hand, they have to pay zakat, which is, eligible Muslims pay 2.5% of their wealth as a tax, which is a religious tax. And of course, that would not be enforced on the non-Muslims, but the Muslims have to pay 2.5% of their wealth under Islamic rule. So it is only fair that non-Muslims also have some percentage of tax, which typically was lower than the 2.5% that Muslims had to pay. Um, and that is what something you had to pay. So if you're living in a state, you pay taxes. Muslims paid the zakat and on all surplus wealth, and here the non-Muslims paid jizya. And there are some instances where depending on the situation, he actually let some people go without paying it because they were having extremely difficult situations and stuff like that. He regulated activities of Hindus and Muslims alike. So this is also very important to understand. People think that Aurangzeb was this man who did not want Hindus to celebrate their festivals, did not want them to practice their religion, did not want them to be free. This is absolutely not true. He was someone who was very simple. He wanted a simple life in his own empire. He curbed some practices that were deemed as extravagant. And I mean, it is only logical that he also curbed some activities of his population in his empire, whether it was Muslims or Hindus. He placed some restrictions on festivals, on sort of activities that could lead to violence. So he restricted some activities around Hindu festivals, but at the same time, he also restricted some activities around the Muslim festivals. So he also tried to ban or at least limit the usage of alcohol, opium, prostitution, and gambling, which were known to create so many problems in the society at that time. So this was again done to uplift the people, to make sure the empire reaches its full potential, and that people are not engaged in these kind of vices and become addicts and end up hurting themselves. Now, Aurangzeb, as the overseer of Hindu religious communities, many Hindus, there are certain extreme groups that are creating this facade of Aurangzeb being, a Hindu hater. So let's look at the numbers. Let's look at what history says. Aurangzeb, in fact, never spearheaded a program to convert Hindus on a mass scale. So some individuals, it is natural that they found some compelling reasons to adopt Islam, whether they did that sincerely or they did that to climb, up in the Mughal hierarchy, or to be eligible for certain jobs. We will never know. But Aurangzeb never carried out some mass scale conversions of Hindus. And when it comes to temples, actually before that, very few Hindus, it has been documented that very few Hindus actually converted to Islam during in Aurangzeb's India. Very relatively few. This is again made clear by regular news bulletins, sort of, that arrived at the royal court, which detailed such incidents of small conversions, and it actually had the names of the people that converted, and so on. So this is all documented. It is not what these extreme groups say, that he gave people the choice of Islam and the sword. That this is all garbage and nonsense. The Hindu and Jain temples dotted the landscape. They were full, and they were functioning in the kingdom. So they were spread all over his empire. People would be free to go and pray, go and worship, and do whatever they want. And when it comes to destruction of temples, did Aurangzeb destroy any Hindu temples? Yes. Aurangzeb is, according to experts, Richard Eaton is actually an expert in this. He's actually an authority who actually did a research, and he came up with a number at the max to be in a few dozens at the max, even accounting for ones that may not have been recorded. And they're all over the empire, and it wasn't in a specific spot. That goes to show that there were thousands and thousands of temples, but only a select few, a few dozen, maybe 2 dozen, were destroyed, even accounting for the ones, like I said, that may not have been recorded. So some scholars even came up with 16. Some scholars even came up with 16. So there was no large scale hatred or sort of taking revenge against Hindus. Aurangzeb followed Islamic law in granting protections to non-Muslim leaders and their religious places of worship. So why were some temples destroyed? I mean, that's the question. Some temples, before that, temples and Hindus, they were entitled to certain rights and state defenses. They were entitled to Mughal state protection, and the emperor generally, uh, you know, endeavored to ensure their well-being. Imperial interests, some people actually lost that goodwill when they acted against state interests. So Aurangzeb actually targeted, and he actually destroyed certain select Hindu temples throughout his rule, because these temples had a political significance at that time, and they were trying to uh, act militarily and conspire against the empire. So that is when Aurangzeb took action. He never had like a large scale program to destroy all temples. And this was only used, you know, on rare occasions, and this is something that was used very sparingly. So media outlets today, claim to list his atrocities against Hindus and stuff like that. And all of this, you have to understand, is done to fuel communal fires. There were thousands and thousands of temples in his time, and only at most a few dozen were destroyed. Aurangzeb wrote his vision of how good kings should treat temples. I mean, this is something very interesting. And other religious sites of non-Muslims, which is Nishan, which is written in a Nishan or a princely order. He sent a princely order to Rana Raj Singh, a Hindu Rajput ruler of Mewar in 1654. And look at this. This is what he said. Because the persons of great kings are shadows of God, the attention of this elevated class, who are the pillars of God's court, is devoted to this, that men of various dispositions and different religions or mazahib should live in the veil of peace and pass their days in prosperity, and no one should meddle in the affairs of the other. So Aurangzeb, in the same princely order, he condemned any king that resorted to bigotry as guilty of quote, raising God's prosperous creations and destroying divine foundations. Aurangzeb also issued an imperial farman order to local Mughal officials at Banaras that directed them to halt any interference in the affairs of local temples. There you have it. It is documented. Took action against the harassment of Hindu residents of Banaras and nearby places, right? When Aurangzeb learned that several people, out of spite and hatred, were actually harassing the Hindu residents of Banaras and the places near it, he actually, sent took action. He actually sent an order that you must see that nobody unlawfully disturbs the Brahmins or other Hindus of that region, so that they might remain in their traditional place and pray for the continuance of the empire. So, I mean, these are beautiful words that show that he was all about protecting the rights of the people, protecting their freedoms, protecting their religious centers of worship. And he promised to actually turn back on many un-Islamic practices. And in his in his eyes, in Aurangzeb's eyes, Islamic teachings and Mughal tradition enjoined Aurangzeb to protect non-Muslim temples, their religious sites, and their holy men. This is how Aurangzeb looked at the temples. The facts, the figures, the numbers give us this idea. So reject the extreme opinions. British use this concept of divide and rule, but unfortunately, this same divide and rule policy is being used today by many politicians, many political parties, and many, many, many people, unfortunately. So, throughout his rule, Aurangzeb's default policy was to ensure the well being of Hindu religious institutions and their leaders. In the ninth year, there are some incidents that I'll mention. There is a lot more that can be said in this regard. In the ninth year of his rule, he sent a farman to the Umanand temple at Guwahati in Assam, confirming an earlier land grant and the associated aid to collect revenue. In the year 1680, he directed that a Hindu ascetic who lived on the banks of the river Ganges be left free from harassment. In 1687, he gave land on the Ghat in Banaras to Ramjivan Gosain to build houses for Brahmins. In 1691, Aurangzeb granted a huge piece of tax-free land on Mahant Balak Das Nirvani of Chitrakoot to support the Balaji temple, and the list goes on. There were some occasions where Aurangzeb actually prohibited construction of Hindu temples. However, this was very specific to Banaras. And again, this was an exception, not the norm. This was a departure from the norm. Temples were actually associated with political action, so only a select were destroyed that were acting against the state, and action was taken in the region where there was unrest and potential conspiracy or military action against the empire. So uh, the plenty of Hindu temples were being destroyed, you know, by other Hindu kings. They demolished each other's temples regularly by looting and defiling the images of their gods. Some even ordered their men to some Hindu kings even actually ordered their men to write down poetry on these actions. I mean, this is documented in Sanskrit resources. So they in fact looked at temples as something of a political significance, and they kind of destroyed temples to bring down the morale of the enemy. So whenever the one Hindu king would attack his enemy who was also a Hindu, they would go and destroy the temples. And Richard Eaton actually documents this in his book. For people that are interested, you can look at his book, Temple Desecration. It is also interesting that plenty of Hindu temples were being built in other places during this time, during the time when there was a prohibition at Banaras to build more temples, which was again an exception. At the same time, there was other places in his empire where you were free to build temples, and this was happening. This is again another quote and advice that was given by a Muslim jurist. It is not lawful to lay waste ancient idol temples, and it does not rest with you to prohibit ablution in a reservoir, which has been customary from ancient times. One of the thousands of Hindu and Jain temples in Mughal of the thousands of Hindu and Jain temples in Mughal domains, most, although not all, like we said, there were exceptions that were destroyed because of political action, political opposition. Most of the temples stood at the end of Aurangzeb's rule. So, since Hindus were actually destroying each other's temples well before Aurangzeb, I mean, Aurangzeb came in and looked at that as something that was well within his target for punitive state action. And this was a very extreme measure that he took, and it was by no means a norm or like a pattern that he had, as we have seen. So who was Aurangzeb then? We have discussed so many things, his interaction with people of other faith, who he was in his early years, how he was like an administrator, as a moral man, what his values were. So now let's try to unshackle Aurangzeb a little bit. And there is a quote by James Baldwin, an American writer. I am what time, circumstance, history have made of me. Certainly, but I am also much more than that. So are we all. I mean, this is so true. So Aurangzeb was also a man of his time. Today, he is shown as a fanatic. And this bears very little resemblance to the historical Aurangzeb. He's shown as a bigot who was bent on destroying Hindus and their religion. So we actually, as people, of people of history, people of fairness, we should diffuse this inflammatory communal ideas and focus on history as it was. Uh, there is only one way going forward, and it shouldn't be done through communal disharmony. Aurangzeb acted according to his ideals of justice, commitment to his principles, and necessities of politics of his time. He was not interested in creating or furthering a Hindu-Muslim conflict in his empire. His aim was uh, to expand the empire and to have a unifying rule. And I will end with this, that famous quote by Khalfi Khan, who was an 18th century historian, who said, "To attempt a summary of the major events of a 50-year reign of an emperor equal to Jamshed is to measure the ocean's water with a pitcher." Aurangzeb was not the man some extreme groups describe him as. He was a complex emperor. He was someone who wanted justice, prosperity for all people in his empire, regardless of religion.